phone, and then the folks on the phone for who's in the room. Sorry. You're excited. I'll have to do a disclaimer. I start vacation tomorrow morning. So that's right. We're moving through this committee. We're going to be done by 9:30. Let's go.
I've got for you. As soon as I leave this, I go pick up my husband and we're gone.
Okay, so both you and I are on the same track. What's on the agenda? So I apologize for not being thoughtful of who's here. So let's first go around the table and identify who's here in the room, and then we'll go to the phone. And since I'm the one that's disrupted everything, I'm Janelle Dodson. So.
I'm Christine Potter, Chief Program Coordinator.
And I'm regarding Director of Multnomah Early Childhood Program, David Bagler.
I'm Grant Corey, Director of Mount Hood Head Start, Real Head Start.
I'm Ryan Robin Open from the Research Institute in Spark.
And Tom Udell from the Research Institute.
Susan Hammond from Oregon After School for Kids. Meredith Russell, Early Learning Division. And let's see what this is. Oh, she's black. So on the phone, Renee.
Good morning. This is Renee from the YMCA of Oregon.
Sabrina. Betty.
Oh, Betty wrote good morning.
Oh, good. Chelsea.
Good morning.
And is Cheryl on? And it looks like we do have a couple members of the community, of the public, on the call. So welcome, members of the public. For coming. Okay, and then I will turn it over to you for the recommendation discussion. Great. So hi everybody, this is Meredith. Just a couple caveats to the meeting. Oh great, welcome Maria. Maria just joined us. Neither Dawn nor Shauna could be here today, and so I will try to do my best to both facilitate as well as present information. So please feel free to jump in if there's pieces that I'm missing or pieces that I need to slow down on. And I'm also really excited to say that our partners from the Research Institute are going to be doing some of the presenting of the information today, which I'm very excited and thankful about, as we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the weeds, and their team spends hours a day thinking about this stuff, researching this stuff, creating these proposals. It's just great to be able to hear it directly from them, and so that will be a great addition. So they're living it every day. They are living and breathing it, yes. So they'll be joining us, so that's great. So the first thing on our agenda is, if you recall, we were going to be taking out the work that you as a committee have done so far, and all of our thinking to CCEC, which is Bobby Weber chairs that committee, and the Equity Implementation Committee, which Sue Miller, I believe, is chairing interim right now. And we did not get to the Spark portion yesterday at the Child Care and Education Committee. They were talking, they're also deep in child care rules revision right now, so they were very deep into that in terms of qualifications for staff and rules. So we didn't get to our piece, but it was extremely informative in terms of where child care rules are going around that piece, which I think obviously sets the threshold and the foundation for what we're doing. So it was almost more valuable, I think, to hear all of that, and then we will need to come back together as the revision team to think about how that balances good morning with where we're at. So more to come on that, but we didn't get a chance to hear feedback from them. We did, however, take some of the proposals to the Equity Implementation Committee, which was a terrific discussion. I would say we mainly ended up focusing on the personnel qualifications and presenting with them the new structure of having the Oregon Registry step level, as well as the other components around professional development planning, professional development being taken, and language support in terms of diverse languages and experience. And we had a very robust conversation about that. And so I'm going to pause a second. Now, do you want to share some of your takeaways from that conversation?
Well, one of the strong takeaways had to do with education attainment. You know, on that little graph that we have, education is really high, and then we put experience, professional development plan, and all of that as the counterbalance. Especially in the rural areas, there is a real concern that the education attainment may not be as easily to attain. And so there's some concern about that. And so I was thinking about that also. I was thinking, in the other world of hiring people, you look at so many years of experience as equating to what have you. So maybe wanting to look at some of that too to see if we can get some balance for those in the rural areas. Anyway, that was really, I think, one of the strong. The other one was, first of all, I think the Equity Committee was pleased with where we were going at this point in time and some of the considerations that were being given to the education qualifications and to the inclusion of families. They were really pleased about that family voice that you guys had all mentioned. I think one of the suggestions that was made, which I thought was really positive, was to add a statement about demonstrating the use of culturally responsive practice, curriculum, and materials. Because we know that when we draw from the community, sometimes they're able to take our curriculum and adapt it to be culturally sensitive. And I know even hand gestures. I'm learning that some of the new immigrant populations that we're having to modify some of our hand gestures because not knowing that culturally they're not appropriate, and you don't know that. So I just think that was really a great, rich discussion about looking at that, what our teachers and our professional individuals bring to, not saying you should have a set thing, and that's what determines, but the value of the richness of contributions, I think. Would you say that was part of that?
Yes,
really,
definitely.
So, I think that was what I recall.
One other piece I recall was around, they definitely appreciated the addition of having diverse language staff there, but I think there was some concern about the then what piece of that, and concern that are people going to be hired just because they bring a diverse language, or are those folks with diverse language going to be truly integrated into the practice so that all of their skills and knowledge and practices are integrated. And somebody gave the example, it's one thing to hire somebody because they speak Spanish, for example, and they can say to the children, oh, please sit down, or we're go wash your hands, etc., as opposed to really being integral to the staff. And so that was a big takeaway for me about, is that something that we need to reflect in Spark? Is that something we reflect in the professional development around our system for programs and providers? So,
and then it's not just language either.
This is Pam. And I'm just wondering, when you're assessing teacher-child interaction, will you be assessing the interaction of all of those that are in there so that I guess in Head Start, we often hire parents that speak multitude of languages, and they come, a lot of times they volunteer, and then they end up being substitutes, and they are integrated, but you're right, at first, they do, they're uncomfortable, as everybody, at first, but that's a process. And how you assess how well it's going is by observing the teacher-child interactions. You can see how that person's being integrated into the system. So I'm just wondering, I understand that concern, but I would have thought that teacher-child interactions, observing that might take care of that.
I think that's why the suggestion to add a comment about demonstrate the use of culturally responsive practice, curriculum, materials, etc. So I think trying to capture that. And that also captures the culture. Oftentimes we think about language, but it may not just be language. I mean, it may be English, but it's a different culture. So trying to attain out that. So I think that was the richness of recognizing the diversity, and it's not just cut and dried about got this degree, so off we go. It's about that wealth that the teacher brings. It's not always in a degree.
And it was also interesting because they brought up how is that staff person supported. So if someone is hired or has been on the staff a long time and brings a diversity of language and culture, are they being supported? Are they being mentored? Do they have other folks around them to encourage, etc.? So my takeaway for next steps is really, I think, for the revision teams to dive a little deeper, and I think Lillian, who staffs the committee in our division, can also be a resource for waste and all around next steps.
Well, the other next step is we were looking at the equity and looking at it in the family and in the domain of family, but looking at there might be some other domains where we see equity, because like you were talking, Pam, about the richness of the teacher interaction. It seems to me that in the learning component, there are places there where we can demonstrate that equity too. So, that was just to look broader, not just sometimes we pigeonhole it into it, just like we've done in the past. We need to be looking broader. I think we found that when we look at environment, not just the structure, it's the atmosphere that the teacher and the assistant brings to that.
Any thoughts, comments, or questions from folks on the phone? Okay. Oh, it looks like it. I think, yeah. Oh, there we go.
One feedback I could give to the committee too, your feedback about taking the 3, the 4, and the 5 and building on that, the committees really liked that, because then you could see what was in a tier or star, 3-star tier, whatever we're going to call that, and then the next and next, and see how it grows and how it develops. So that's a very positive thing. That's what I recall with my vacation brain. I think we will be meeting with the Equity Committee again after we take the steps from today. And when I think looking at the rating system and some of those things will give us more information that we'll be able to take back. And then incorporating some of the comments that the committee made. So, okay. Ready to
Number 3.
Go down to the policy guidance.
Yeah. I believe that was this one. Just a refresher for folks that the policy guidance tool is that 2-pager that I believe is in your packet, and it's just a reference to the Early Learning Council principles as well as the goals for Spark to help kind of guide the questions that we want to sort of assess what we're seeing today against.
And the goals that we have for Spark and the principles are very much in alignment. They're stronger in some areas than in others, but they're reflected in all of the principles. That was just a reference.
Yes.
So, the interim plan. We had identified that we're making some decisions as we go along, and people out in the community are working on their portfolios and they're anticipating change, but I think what we were wanting to do is to see what kind of an interim plan we could have so that people get to take advantage of some of the things that we've already accomplished and made agreements on, so that people aren't out there trying to do things that we're going to say, oh, well, that's very nice, but you don't need that. And because we know that it takes a lot of work. It does not feel good to say, oh, gee, that's very nice. And especially with our in-home providers, when, this is a real challenge for them to be doing the care as well as developing their portfolios. And so we don't want them to have to go do things that we've said, oh, we're moving forward in that. So I think that's what we wanted to say. What is it we could identify?
Right, and so we've talked a bit with Alyssa Chatterjee at our office, who staffs the Early Learning Council and all of the committees, just to think about how do we approach this where we don't necessarily have decisions that have been set in stone or the standards haven't been approved to the Early Learning Committee yet, and how do we bridge that gap to both sort of have this concept of rolling revisions so that providers and families are benefiting from the improvements that we're looking to make without getting ahead of the Early Learning Council, who really has the authority to adopt these standards. And so what was suggested to us is that we talk about it here and that we get, if there is consensus, we get consensus here that yes, the idea of rolling out revisions to the field as we settle on them here, that we think that that's a good idea, and that that we take that to the Early Learning Council and say, yes, this committee has thought about this, and that based on some general guiding principles, that as those things come up, then the folks doing the Spark work could roll that out to the field. And we have sort of a few examples, but we don't want to get too tied down to those examples, because as the examples rise up, there's going to be a lot in thinking about, okay, is this something that really makes sense? Is this something that's not going to confuse everybody? Is this something that really benefits providers? Does this support equity? Does this create a smooth transition to the new system? So there's sort of like almost a rubric of guiding principles that we want to run them through. So we don't want to tie ourselves down necessarily to committing to one particular rolling vision or another, but we want to come up with a recommendation that yes, as we come up with those things, going through those guiding principles, then we roll them out. I can give just a couple high-level examples if that would be helpful of some of the things that are kind of coming up as we think about that. So one idea of a rolling revision that we would want to test against those guiding principles is the requirement right now that programs have to be in business for 2 years in order to intentionally engage in Spark. And right now, we are already testing that out with preschool promise programs. They have gotten a, I don't want to say waiver because that means other things, but they, thank you. That sounds really fancy.
No, that sounds like they get money.
They are allowed.
Yeah, they'll get money for it.
Yes, they are excused from it being in 2 years in business. So we've got that as sort of a precedent. And if we have programs that are eager to get going now in this system that's set up and they aren't 2 years in business, that would be something that we would want to look at giving an option for. In terms of sort of soft rolling changes to the revision process, we know there are domains that we're not going to be including in Spark that exist now. So would we look at rating those differently, or not having them maybe count as much towards a program's star rating at this point, because we know in the future they're not even going to be standards in domains. And so it's pieces like that that we would want to test. Again, the guiding principles would be, is it supportive of programs? Does it address equity concerns for programs that are waiting for the new system, or that even if they're in our current system would benefit from the new system? And is this a way to create smoother transitions to the new system? So I'll just pause and see if folks have thoughts about that, questions, concerns.
My first thought is to think about the equity self-assessment that we had to do. Are we all that, or was that just do you know what I'm talking about? I'll just say a statement and my question is
Thank you for calling the Southern Oregon Education Service District. Your call is important to us, and someone will be with you shortly.
Like somebody at the top what has to be done. The next level says, okay, here's how you're going to do it, and the next level down tries to come up with the details and the assignments. But it seemed so rushed, and then they came in later and gave us another assignment and another assignment. We're thinking we're done with the first one. So I don't know. I'm apprehensive, but open to the idea of rolling. I think it is. I think once we're in 2 years, that's my feeling or whatever, those things will jump in sooner, but I agree with everything. It's almost like confusing.
If there are some things we know are not going to be required, though, I'm just worried about it.
Yeah, you say like standard, whatever, for sure not.
I just think of those.
That's where my question is. And do we have people out there that couldn't get star rated because of specific standards, and those specific standards are not going to be in new systems? It seems to me that those are good places to look at maybe changes, but rolling out new things a little bit at a time. I agree. And let's just see that in Kristen's example, it sounds like changes were made and each change brought on additional work for you. And I think as long as we're mindful that if we roll out a revision, that it's decreasing the workload. And as changes are made further, that's not going to put you in a situation like Kristen had, where each change brought extra work.
Yeah. Head Start, where that happens a lot, where changes are just put out a lot. It is extremely confusing, and it is also very labor intensive. Deal with, and unfortunately it's what we have to deal with, but I don't necessarily think that means we should impose that on other people. And then I think it's like, when you brought up family childcare, I'm like, it's one person. I mean, at least we have a team of people that sit there and go, oh God, how are we going to do this? But I can't imagine being by yourself while you're awful, trying to run your business and care for kids and stuff. To me, when it's something that's like, the example you used about going from being in business for 2 years to not, that makes sense, because that's just a simple book. But changing, let's just, I'm going to pick something off the wall. Always my examples are usually weird. Like, we're going to change and we're going to say you can have a TV on all the time. I think that's confusing from, you know what I mean? That's not a clear-cut example like what you were talking about. I think it just muddies the water, and then it stirs people up to argue about, well, I've always thought there should have been TVs, or why are they, no, they shouldn't have TVs. You know what I just hear people having lots of discussion about it versus something that's really clean like that. And I know I used an off-the-wall example.
Actually, I think it's a helpful example because I'm hearing it's at such a level of granularity, like that level of detail might be, because it's too small picture as opposed to something really big picture that's clean, like 2 years in business.
Yeah.
Or if there's a whole section that's gone.
Yeah, big juice.
Yeah, like a whole, that's just gone. Actually, we should put that out so people don't work on it.
That's all I was, and I'm not saying that there is, I'm just thinking that as you mentioned, I'd been out in the field and I heard that, and I kept thinking, we don't want to make it harder on people, we're wanting to make it better so more people can participate.
Kristen and then Lisa, oh sorry.
I have a suggestion, this is Kristen, and I'm wondering if we could look at it like people who are already working toward their stars, star rating, by a certain date, then they operate under the old system, and then when they reapply for a higher star level, then they would operate under the new system. I'm sure there are glitches with that too, but I just wonder if that's a starting point for thinking about how we can move without rolling.
So that would be if we decided not to do rolling revisions. That's kind of the opposite of it, right? What you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, that would be. And this is Lisa, and maybe if you went with Kristen's suggestion, I guess you went that way. Is maybe I guess I'm more concerned about when people have reached a star rating or they're working on a standard, and now we're saying it's not going to be there, and then you weighted, not weighted, or oh too bad, right? So if you went in that direction, then you would still get credit. Do you know what I mean, for that standard under the old system, right? Because if you move now, I don't know. I think you have to be really careful for people who have worked really hard to get where they are with whatever rating, and now you're saying we're not even going to have that. So thanks for trying. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Somehow I think you need to think about that when I think about the school districts and their pre-K that have really struggled to find the time to be able to do all of this, and now we're backtracking and saying, you didn't have to do that one, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think there's a lot of people economic about that.
So,
May I speak?
sure.
Okay. These conversations are exactly the conversations that we've been having when we talk about this, and when Meredith started saying rolling revisions, like rolling out decisions that have already been made, I sort of had a big reaction like that, because we are thinking more about little things like the 2-year business. Wow, we just opened the gate for more, but it's not like anybody lost work that they're done, or there's this huge change that we have to communicate, like it's okay if you submit it without AB1 but not AB2, but sort of a way of opening the door for those programs that are going to have, they're going to be able to achieve a 3-star in 6 months when we have a new system, and are working through it now, and they keep coming up against a barrier, and so that's the idea, but it's really hard to say what that is, because it's probably different for one of the students programs and one of your programs and one of your programs. So I just really appreciate the conversation. I always do it, like the thinking that you're going at. There are things that might be easy, but a big rolling, like now we're going to start doing PQ on a point system while you're still doing the rest of your portfolio, probably, and then it needs one, like you said, one change now, and then we're going to add another standard or something. I think that's helpful, because maybe the concept of rolling, maybe that word is a little scary, because it's like you said, then like, okay, this change now, and then, oh my gosh, in a couple weeks we're going to roll something else out, and then rolling. Maybe there's a way to think about it more like there's several pieces that we're early adopting, boom, and not so that people aren't constantly waiting for things to come out.
Meredith, you're right on, because when you first started talking, I was like, oh, yeah. And then the moment you said rolling, I'm like, no, I don't like that.
It sounds like a snowball down a hill, right?
Because I know what it feels like.
So what I also heard is clear-cut items.
Yeah.
You know, just like no 2 years.
So I think we had Maria and then Eva.
So this is Maria. The other thing I was thinking is just, particularly because I work with the Spanish providers, it's also we started to roll out a new standard. How quickly would that standard be translated and available to some of the other populations, not just the Spanish, but the Russian population? So that would still leave them kind of out until that kind of rolls out, and that doesn't, to me, doesn't really show equity as we kind of roll out things. So if we're going to roll out a new standard, I think that's clear. I completely agree with everybody. That's a simple fix, and that would help some of my providers who are in that. But as we think about some of these other standards, I think that we're moving forward and we have finalized, that they also get translated before rolling it out so they're accessible to all populations.
Very good.
So I'm trying to capture some of the themes that we've heard about what might work for, we can think of a term like early accessibility, and I'm hearing that would have to be accessible to all language populations at the same time. Right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, not saying 6 months from now,
Yeah, they put something and then it takes forever to get it translated.
2 years sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Eva.
This is Eva. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can not pull it out early, but give some guidance to the people that are starting on that path. You know, with QRS came out at first, there was the pilot counties that could do it, but I have been involved in it at a provider level, and I waited a year and a half to get what is it I'm going to do, and I really wanted to work on something, but I didn't have anything that I was given to work on. And I'm wondering if there are ways that we can provide some guidance to people that want to work towards getting a star rating in a year in the new system, rather than give them the old system and say, here, work on this, but we know that you're not going to apply this way.
That doesn't sound very good.
It doesn't, and it doesn't feel very good either. So I'm just, without giving them, this is what the standard will be, and rolling it out in pieces, but being able to give them the guidance, because QRS is improving quality over time. It's not this happens this month. That we're giving them something to work towards in the next 6 months here with guidance.
That's a great point.
So, to respond to that, because I even just thinking of like the NAYC accreditation system in terms of there are steps that you go through before you actually get there, and that's when you're talking, that's what, phase 1, so that people know, hey, we're changing. If you're thinking of starting, here, start with phase 1, and know that phase 1 is all going to be good to go in the new system, because that is a nice transition, and it's acknowledging that it is the work, and you're on the path. You just don't know what phase 2 or 3 is yet.
It's not like, here, wait until we roll this out next year.
Is it possible that the continuous quality improvement portion be rolled out before the rating system? So people could sort of start looking at what the system is and how they fit. Yeah, I think that ties right in with what you were saying, is how do we provide guidance for things that we know are coming but aren't necessarily starting yet? That's kind of mitigating it.
And maybe not necessarily a firm decision yet, right?
Yeah.
But they've got things that they can work on. This bottom, there was, when the pilot happened, there was like a one-pager that was given out. Yes.
Top 5 things you can do right now. Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Yeah. Thanks for reminding us about that.
that also seems to fit with the comment that was made, clear-cut items. So if it's the top 5 you could do, but if it's like the 2 years, it's a clear-cut thing. If we're going to omit this, that's a clear-cut thing.
I just wanted to share in the chat box, Betty had a great way of thinking about it. She says, so it would be more like incremental changes rather than continuous changes.
Yeah.
That captures it really, really, the R word we won't use. So I'm thinking probably time-wise, we probably need to wrap up this section, but I want to just capture some of what I think we have some consensus on for these types of early adopted types of changes that we might want to look at. So I heard, just for folks on the phone, that would have to be something that would be accessible for all languages, all populations at the same time, that we could provide guidance perhaps for some things that were coming down the road, but we don't really want to look at rolling kind of granular level changes. It would have to be something that's clear-cut, like the 2-year example. What are some other high-level points that we can agree on?
I think it's like what Susan was talking about, almost like it should be like a section. It shouldn't be like my example of, well, we're going to change the TV thing. That it's more like putting out a section.
Like a domain.
Whatever.
And if the domain's going to be eliminated, that's nice to know. I just don't want people to do a lot of work and then we say, that was very nice, but don't need it.
So one of the things I think I'm hearing from Lisa is the discussion about people that are already rated. And what does this mean to people that, so in other words, what she's talking about is because it has been onerous on the school districts, because it's totally new to be into any kind of system like this. And what does that do to them if they're already rated, these changes?
So, yeah, because if the new standard, if changes happen, do they would have to adhere to that, I'm assuming, or not? Or you just have your rating, it never goes away, you're good to go no matter what changes occur? Is that?
Well, you're never rated forever. You have to reapply.
Well, that's my point.
And the work of QRS and putting the portfolio together is never, none of it is bad. None of it is unimportant. There's so much in there that even though there were issues with the iteration of it, there was nothing in there that was not helpful to programs to go through. So I would push back a little bit on that, saying that people going, oh, I didn't have to do that, because ultimately it does support the quality improvement of the program.
Kristen, don't we have an endpoint for when our quality improvement rating expires?
Yeah.
So I don't see it, right? Right. Yeah. So then if it expires, then we apply under whatever the system is.
Yeah. So kind of what I'm hearing is we need to message to programs that have gone through it in the existing way and maybe feel like they jumped through a lot of hurdles to do that. Really maybe important steps, but that we message to them what it means, what it's going to mean for them, what their transition will be, that they're not going to lose stars in the new system, where we talked about not un-grandparenting, making sure that they, so maybe some really targeted messaging to those programs.
What if we message it? We keep talking about how this is quality, and your comment about none of this is busy work.
No.
All helps us stick to quality. So keeping that message, this quality framework that we say that we're building on. So we use that language.
How we honor those early adopters.
Right, and the system is moving into this new system because of the work those programs did.
Yeah.
But using a quality framework.
That, not necessarily that it's bad.
That.
School districts, Head Start already have systems and things in place. And when this was rolled out, it was duplicative.
Yes, I
So
totally
therefore,
agree.
that's where glad I did all that work, and it wasn't that the stuff that it was.
And I think I heard a couple other pieces, a sort of high-level principle, which is we want these to be things that reduce the workload for programs, somebody said. And so I think we would want the change to be that balance of it's worth it enough to the programs for whatever type of potential confusion or heartburn for rated programs, that there's sort of that balance that it's significant enough to the program. That very captured. And that so that either it would have to reduce workload of programs, or as Autumn said, it would have to open a door for more programs. Is that capturing some of those high levels? I would say reduce workload or duplication.
Because the duplication often adds to confusion, because you're thinking, what's this?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just look at the CDR versus the CSPC thing. I mean, there's an example right there. It's like,
That's a lot of work and a lot of money.
Yeah. We're talking about that at other tables.
Yeah.
So are you comfortable, so reducing workload or duplication and or opening the door for more programs? Because those are not necessarily the same things, and I'm not trying to put my own ideas in here, I'm just trying to capture.
It seems like it also relates to that third point about the top 5, when you said this piece. Yeah, it relates there.
anything to add about, your chat box? Okay. So this is from Renee. Okay, so Renee says it is important to create a message that communicates to those programs that were not successful with the old system and encouraging that the Spark system will be more all-inclusive. Excellent point. Excellent point, because we haven't talked about those programs yet. We were talking about the ones that got rated. And okay.
Or even those that looked at it and thought it's too daunting because I've got my business I got to do.
Or what do I get out of it?
That's an bigger one, right? It's just something, we really want this to be inviting, and what I was hearing from the field this week is sometimes it's not inviting, and we want them to be invited to the process because they too want to elevate their quality of their service.
Well, thank you. That was a really helpful discussion, I think, to help us frame what goes into that hopper to consider as an early adoption type of thing. So thanks, everybody.
Recognizing that we're moving along towards the fall, late fall, for getting this done.
Right, because the council will adopt the standards in December. Yeah. So that's kind of between now and, I mean, it feels like a long time, but not really a long time to roll out.
Like Maria said, though, when they're adopted, then we can start translating, and then we can start finalizing all the people around them. I mean, there's another 6 month process after the standards are finalized. So I think that, and then there's a transition where we're not going to stop doing all this.
So there's a year of implementation.
Yeah, the implementation.
Which is why we want to get it out.
Right. That's right. So
we don't want programs to be hearing the message, wait until the next revision rolls out.
Yeah.
Because then you've got a whole bunch of people that are on hold.
Yeah.
So a year and a half from now.
Right. And we want this to be a continuous process, not a rolling process.
Great.
Okay. Oh, this is you. Good. I don't remember doing it.
So folks on the phone, we're welcoming Robin Lopez Melton up here to present the next item on the agenda, and she's right in front of the phone, so hopefully she will be easy to hear.
You're going to put it there so I can see it?
Yes. Yes, I will. Give me just a second.
I will start. Oh, I get to see myself too. Awesome. Just by saying thank you all for your hard thinking and work on this, and the educator qualifications and personnel qualifications has been from the very first part of QRAS to now, in looking forward into the Spark standards, been the place where there's the most importance put into it. There's the most equity considerations to consider. It's very, very complicated, and the ideas that have come out of this group to improve the thinking have been excellent, and we really, really appreciate all the work that has happened. And so what I'm going to do, you have in your packet that you've got it in email, this one that says updates to personnel qualification standards from ad hoc and community feedback. We have also taken this proposal for educator qualifications out to the professional development committee, to our implementation team, to community groups, and gotten feedback, and log it very similar to the themes that were brought up here. And so on here we've sort of highlighted the changes that we've made to what you've already heard. I am going to do, hopefully fairly quick. I'm not really good at being quick, so I know you want to be on vacation, so I'll keep that in mind. Just sort of a review of where we were, what it was, what is now, to sort of put these into the frame of that, and move everybody forward. So, new slide.
Kristen, where did you say the clicker was? Where, the white thing?
I don't think that's There are people on the phone were, oh, up here?
No, she did it.
Okay. I'll say Chris did it. Okay. Oh, and then you guys do there too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Very
Well,
well.
there- okay. That works. So here's one of the changes. We had said we were focusing on educators until 5-star, and the theme of the support staff, the other people in the classroom, those parents that are being brought in and trained to move into the lead roles in classrooms are very, very important. And we looked at that input, and just so people are clear, currently we have the standards based on categories and based on licensing titles. We're still staying away from that because we learned that that doesn't work for many, many programs. They don't use the same licensing titles. Program staff very different. And so we are still looking at allowing programs to tell us who are the leads in their program, and those are the educators, and who are the people that support the educators. So often that will be director and teachers in the educator part and aides or assistants in the other part, but we know that there are many different titles and many things, and so it's still the responsibility of the program to identify those staff. I'm excited too. What counts, we're still looking at educational attainment, and there's a little asterisk there. We'll talk about the difference where we're looking for educational attainment. Still looking at experience. The other feedback that we got, many places and many sort of different conflicting feedback, but definitely was like looking at the ongoing professional development, especially when we were focusing on the Set 2 and Set 3 in college classes, didn't seem to fit. And so we have combined that with the professional development plan and are calling it professional development planning and progress. And we'll talk about what progress might look like. And language support. All right, so I'm not jumping back and forth. We are still looking at educational attainment, and we're looking at educational attainment all the way through at 3, 4, 5 for the educators. We're not looking at the actual attainment, so not steps on the registry for aides and assistants. We're looking at all of the other pieces for those, because we know that those are often the staff that are just coming in and probably haven't attained a high step on the registry. But what we heard was they are important. They should be having professional development plans. They are integral in the classroom and need to be working on their professional development to increase their quality in the classroom. And as before, there would be some points awarded at the 5-star level for those aides that have attained education. There we go. What counts? We still have experience in there. Currently, there is no credit for experience, and that has, as you all know, been a theme from the field from the very beginning, that education should count, does count, and so we're still looking at that. And one of the questions that came up is, how would you be defining experience? And what we're saying is our professional development system already has a definition for experience, and we would be using their definition from the Oregon Registry. We need to have conversations about who would be tracking experience now. That came up from the Professional Development Registry, that yes, they have a way that some people track it with their professional development or with their Oregon Registry step, but it's not required. They never update it, so it would look like somebody who got their step 10 years ago only has 5 years of experience. So it's looking at a systems level way of looking at experience, and but the definition is definition of accepted by the state at the time that it was rolled out, and so look at that as the definition and then figuring out who tracks it. Okay, so here's where we get a little bit deeper in a change since you had seen this last. Again, on the left side is currently, here's how we look at ongoing professional development planning. And basically, it's getting more license hours than licensing, and as the steps go up, it gets to be more. We also currently have an alternative evidence for this standard, where we know that many programs were getting in, working on their portfolio and doing that big lift, and then we were also saying, and oh, by the way, while you're doing that, make sure you're getting 10 extra training hours. And instead, we allow them an alternative evidence where they sign and say, yes, we know that now the expectation is for me to get, and my staff to get 24 hours a year of training, and then it becomes an ongoing expectation. We also require that all of the staff in programs, and I think this is where some of the duplication comes in, all staff use the Oregon Center for Career Development Professional Development Plan, and then we require that they submit 20% of those to sort of prove that they're doing 100%. Again, that would not be the requirement. As you heard before, having a professional development plan would earn you points. And that can be one that's produced by OCCD. It can be the one that your program produces. It can be what works for you. Having support with that plan, and like you've heard before, that could be the director supporting their staff with their professional development plans. It could be a family child care working with a quality improvement specialist or a cohort, or someone else from a CCR&R. All of those pieces would earn more points for this. And then instead of looking at before in a sort of separate section, we were saying you would get points for having done step 2, 3, or 4. What we're looking at is that that they would earn extra points for showing progress on their professional development plan, and that would look different for different professionals. Right now, nobody recognizes anybody that's enrolled in a degree program because mostly they're not submitting their credits to the Oregon Registry after every term, but they are dedicated and working on a very important professional development plan. And so enrollment in a degree program or enrollment in college might be a way to earn points to show that you're making progress. For those that are working towards a step 7.5 or higher, it may be at hours in 3-star or in step 3, step 2, or college credits. It may be that's how you're saying, yes, I'm making progress on this. Or for those entry-level staff, it just may be taking ongoing training hours. And we want to make sure that we're not duplicating licensing, because licensing already requires you to be taking training hours. So it would be looking at that. And some of that, it would be really easy to see, and we wouldn't ask for extra documentation, because if we're already able to get things out of ORO, we would just say, show us there, and if they're showing that they're taking lots of Set 2 training, we're not going to ask them for any other proof of progress. If they want to say, I'm enrolled in a degree program, then they would, or my staff, the staff person is enrolled in a degree program, they would be able to write that. So the balance of evidence there would be a little bit different. The reason that we didn't just say, you know what, you're right, it's really hard to, well, licensing already requires ongoing training, why do we need to look at it? Looking at Set 2 and Set 3, that's problematic. We wanted to make sure that we were able to show or to recognize those providers and those staff that are really, really working, because we see it all the time. We see professional development plans coming in, or QRS reports with people taking hundreds of hours, and they haven't achieved that Step 7 yet, but they're taking hundreds of hours to get there, and we want to be able to recognize that without requiring this. You know, if somebody already has a Step 11, do we really need them taking 24 hours of ongoing professional development every year, and making sure that it's documented, and they work at a Head Start, so they have to document it with Head Start and with the Oregon Registry. Those kinds of things don't really work for everyone, and so we needed it to be a way to say we value professional development planning, and we value that you're making effort, but we're not requiring everyone also to make that effort, because if you already have a Step 11, you're not going to need those extra points that you're going to get for having this professional development plan and making progress on it. You're going to have quite a bit of points in there, and you're not going to really need to worry about, okay, now I have to make sure I'm taking set 2 training so that I get those extra points to be able to be qualified. You're showing that you're qualified in a different way. You're also maintaining your ongoing hours with licensing, and we don't need to require any more of you. Those of you that are working on moving up the registry and putting in that extra time and effort, we want to be able to recognize that. We also don't want it to be a barrier for those programs that have access issues to ongoing training. So making it a requirement means that then you have access issues. Making it a way to earn points to show that you're working on it means that they're able to earn points added with all of the other pieces. And as you all know, the way that we're setting up the system also is that PQ is not going to be a gotcha anymore. It used to be sort of a gotcha, like if you didn't get your step, you were out. There was no way you were going to be a 3-star. Now when Meredith starts talking about weighting and minimums and all of those things, PQ is going to be a way that you work towards showing that your program is quality. But if you have access issues, if you're working on your step level and you're not quite at that, full points there, you're still going to be able to show how awesome you are in all the other areas and achieve your star rating. So just remembering how these pieces fit into the system.
We don't need to be here anymore. You got this.
I especially like this because of our English language learners. I mean, some of our people have to take math and writing at least 10 times because it's such a challenge, and sometimes they give up. But this way they can do it.
Our K-12 too.
Wow. Wow.
That was a huge complaint for K-12. I've already got my master's. Why do I have to write?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Big. Sorry to derail you, but I was really.
You can derail me with hugs anytime you want. I think that we were going to run some of these. I think maybe we had a fist to fight. Let's keep going, and then I think Meredith is going to run through a little bit of feedback facilitation where you can write down hugs all around if you want. Language ability. There you go. All right. So this one hasn't changed since we've seen it last, but it's definitely still being included from the equity implementation team, really looking at how much weight it gets, and then the other issues, making sure that they're also getting training, education, and integrated into the piece, which sort of talks about the other pieces that we've added that probably works. But remembering that we're giving points for staff that are bilingual, and then also if the program is saying these are bilingual staff that are working with children and families and communicating with children and families, there's more points for that. Because it's really important to hire people who are bilingual, because then you do have something you can offer. But if you're hiring someone that's bilingual, I think Autumn, you said it really well at one of the meetings, that the staff that you hire speaks the language of the population that you serve. So that would be maximum points, because that's the community that you're serving, you're meeting that need. If you hired someone that spoke German, that would be an asset to your program, but maybe not meeting a community need. And maybe it would end up meeting a community need, and you would end up with bilingual or monolingual German families in your program. But sort of that balance of, we want to make sure we're recognizing those programs and staff that are meeting that need.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about that? Would this be for bilingual staff, or could it be monolingual staff in a diverse language?
Monolingual staff, absolutely. Just serving the needs of children and families. So again, this seeing this graphic just to remind that we really still are, the purpose of this is to create ways to recognize staff that are making progress, but what we know from research, what we know from our own validation study, that educational attainment actually makes a difference for child outcomes. And so what we're trying to do is recognize the field as we're moving it towards educational attainment, and so still providing a little more weight on educational attainment is important for the integrity of it all, but recognizing as we're moving forward through that process. And again, the weight is to be determined. We're going to talk a little bit about weight and minimums in a little bit, because it's a huge balance, as anything changes, it all changes. But just that graph to remember. And I think that I talked about this. Oh, I did a little bit. Right now, scoring is sort of pass-fail. You either make it or you don't. But now, with points-based, you're able to show growth and achievement, earn points, but making sure that we set the minimum at a level that is achievable for people who are really working. And then if they're really showing that they're doing all the other stuff, they're a quality program and they can achieve that rating. So just know that that's sort of what we're looking at. That PQ is really important, but it's not the end-all, die-all that it was before, because of the access issues, because of all of the things that you all bring up. And I think I've said this. I now have a slide to show it. But really what we know, educational attainment is linked to quality indicators and child outcomes. And while we value that, we also need to recognize those professionals who are on the path to achievement, and then especially those that have barriers, because those barriers are real and they exist. And we are all across the system working to address those, but we don't need to create another barrier in the QRIS that sort of then that makes that barrier even bigger for programs and professionals. That is all I have to share. I can answer questions. We can move to sort of a recommendation. Are we on the right track? It sounds from a couple people like we might be, but not everyone got to speak. So I'll let you guys facilitate, and I can answer questions or so thoughts.
Let me read the chat box first. We have Renee says, these PQ, pause the record. These PQ changes, I think, will really help our school-age programming, both after school and summer. Thank you, Renee. So we have Kristen.
I have just a question. You mentioned that oral has a definition for experience. Did I miss it, or do we know what that is, or can I hear what that is?
I don't have it on me.
It's embedded in some of their other stuff, like in the school-age credential. It talks about how many hours you have to have worked full-time in a program to get years of experience. I don't know it off the top of my head either, but yeah, it's in there.
So maybe we can send that out.
Yeah,
That's a good
all right,
idea. Send that out. So we can send that out. I can find my agenda here. Okay.
This is Eva. My impression, just correct me if I'm wrong, is that the whole challenge of having licensing updates, staffing levels, all of that challenge goes away now with mobile there. That's huge. Also, reason for because the licensing specialists are busy as well, and it creates one extra step, which is delaying people.
This builds on the license. It doesn't.
Sure, but it takes away the need for a provider to say, now this person is a teacher, and this person's no longer a teacher, and this person's now an aide, and this person's no longer connected with our site. It takes away that whole need to adjust those things before a portfolio is evaluated.
In some of those situations, it was almost demeaning to some of. I mean, some of ours were thinking they were going to get laid off because they said, "There's no way I'm going to go to. I've been teaching for 15 years. I'm not going to go get my BA now." Especially English is difficult for me anyway. It is huge.
Robin, I'm wondering that graphic that you show with the
sort of teeter-totter thing, yeah, I think is a really powerful graphic. And I'm wondering if you could ever share that with us, because I think we're going to be your best ambassadors as the changes roll out, and love to be able to talk to people about how things are going. And I think that it so exemplifies how you listen to feedback and kind of shows where the process is going in this area. And maybe too early, but but I would love to share that at some point.
Communicating those changes is probably, you're right, an important thing to get ahead of, so that I don't remember who, somebody said, like, let's make it welcoming. It sounds like this makes it more welcoming.
Yeah.
So some way of communicating that. I might share that in the equity committees, that graphic, with it being so heavy on education, was part of the discussion about saying, ooh, but what if you can't just get education? So maybe some way to show a balance of that experience is part of education. Right. I think maybe looking at that.
It might be a way to show the graphic that incorporates so much of what you talked about today, that this is asset-based, so that it's building on each other. So maybe we could work on that and get that out. I think it'd be really helpful to explain that, to go back to the equity committee and re-explain this would, I think, be a really different picture.
Right. Any other comments? Anybody on the phone? This is Danelle. It seems to me that this does acknowledge diversity extremely. It emphasizes diversity, whereas before sometimes you had to find the diversity. Now it's there and recognizing value. It does value it. We don't have to go and say, oh, I think it's in here. It's right there, blinking at you. So would you, from a committee perspective, we were thinking that we could use a 5 to 5, if you've done that, you know, if you support this concept of V5, if you think, what is it, if you can buy into it some but not totally, you know, it would be like 3. If it was, yeah, we're headed there, it'd be 4. If you didn't like it, it'd be 2. And 1 is, cannot support this at all. So if we looked at this, okay.
Just to make sure, like, we were presented with the for like how it was spelled out. I mean, this is we don't have like how it's being spelled. This is where you go to my basically the overview that we're okay with none of the details.
Yep. The worksheet that we had at the beginning was really also still concept level. It was just to try to make it more concrete, but the points in there had just sort of been, nothing had been tested to see, like, well, if you have a step 2 and 5 years of experience and a professional development plan, does that mean it's the same as a step 7? None of it had been really tested out. It was just sort of an idea of this is how that would happen. And so, yes, if this is what works, and thinking of these things as weighting in a different way, Meredith had the same question, is, you know, is there, I mean, I was saying a step 11 would, you know, you wouldn't have to worry too much about the other stuff, but maybe at a 3-star, if you have a step 7, you don't really have to worry that much about those things. So that stuff needs to come after this. So, you know, you're not voting on exactly how the points are, how it's going to be weighted. The weighting a little bit of across the board will come later. So did that answer the question? Because we have the concept, then we have to go back and do the weighting, right? So,
Yeah, last time I think that they have the expertise of understanding basically statistical, figuring it all out, that would take us a long time, and that's their area of expertise. So, I mean, I feel like we're concept people.
right.
With the they're into the weeds.
But that will come back to or
The rating. That's a good question, and I think it's a Meredith and Dawn question about, I mean, what I was told was this committee was sort of our policy level decision-making or a recommendation-making body, so I don't want to answer that question. Like how level of specificity will come back. But with the rating, well, because that's one of our next discussions. So I think the points get into the rating, do they not?
Yeah, I think we'll have to think about that a little bit, and I think, I mean, sort of to go back to what Robin was saying, I think that the concept based on these principles, do you feel that this concept meets with the principles that you folks are charged with in terms of, you know, well, you've got them in front of you, and I think that's what we're looking for today, that direction, so that we can then continue. And I think it's going to take a little work. I mean, it's not like next week we're going to be ready to say this is how this all weighs out. I think we could bring it back to you if that was something that you wanted to see. But I think it's kind of the thumbs up on this direction, and if this incorporates the concerns that you had last time. What do you think, Donalda?
Yes, I think yes. I was going to say, I was going to read these 99. I'm going to need to read that.
And just FYI, I pulled up, this is on the Oregon STEP Registry, which is on OCCD's website in a number of different languages, and this gives you a sense of how experience is captured for those that were asking.
So I think, in summary, if I'm correct, what we've done is not made it so regimental, but more diverse. It's not regimented, it's more diverse that reflects experience and community and needs of that community that are being addressed by that provider, not taking some standard tools and saying this is what we're going to use to evaluate. That makes sense. Anyway, that feels more diverse to me. Does that answer your question? We will slowly go through the process. So, does this look like they were going in the right direction? 4, 5, 3?
Folks on the phone, do you want to either shout out where you are at from a fist to 5, or if you want to put it in the chat box, I'd be happy to read it. We have Sabrina's at a 4.
Renee?
Betty's at a 4.
Chelsea?
Renee's at a 4.
And Chelsea. Okay, so it sounds like we can move forward. Great, thank you. I really appreciate you hearing what people have been saying, and I also think that this really complements what we were hearing from the Equity Committee as well. And I know this is what I've been hearing when I've been out and about also. So thank you.
Thank you. Great.
So, whoa, we're right on time. Should we like to take a little bit of a break? Yes. Restrooms are
10 minutes?
10 minutes? Yes.
Okay, 10 minutes for folks on the phone. We'll mute this line so you don't have to hear all the hubbub. We'll see you in 10 minutes, which will be 10:31. Thank you.
expanding surface for you. Then you feel like you can't breathe, like on that little space. No air. Oh, that would have been a hard decision, but I think I would have said, yeah, just take me where I'm going, and other people that maybe are flying for more important reasons than yours. So. Luckily, it's a short flight. Yeah, that was only 5 minutes. And they were
Right, I think we're ready to reconvene.
Yeah, you probably are pretty light on your face.
So we will get her off of mute.
So we're going to reconvene and start talking about the rating system. Now, we're not going to get to any decisions at this point in time. I just start there, I think. But we're going to get input and some discussion so that we can know how we can start in that direction. But it's not a decision. Okay, and so who's going to start?
So Robin and I are going to present about the weighting. So, great. Would you mind showing with the camera so I can get us? Okay, so this is actually just a great segue from the PQ discussion as we talk about wanting to be asset-based and really credit programs for the good work that they're doing across the domains. We had a great conversation last meeting about thinking about weighting in a rating concept and how we want to move forward with rating, thinking more about points to be more asset-based. And we just really appreciated the conversation because I think it was really good thinking and it was different thinking, and it also showed the complexity of how a rating system really comes together when we're moving beyond building blocks to think about being more asset-based. So just as a little bit of context, in the revision, what we've heard nationally as states have done revision is really getting to the few and the powerful. I think you've heard us talk about that a little bit too, and that's really essentially what every state has done, is cutting out things that either don't seem to make a difference for quality, don't seem to make a difference for families and children, are really hard to measure, create so much noise in the system that it doesn't belong in the QRIS. It might be really important, but it might belong elsewhere. And that's, I think, really what we're seeing. Oh, Kristen, if you could advance, please. Thank you. That's really what we're seeing in this. We've gone from 94 standards across our QRIS to 15, and maybe adding in a few as we think about compliance with like standards, but that's just enormous. That is a huge difference. So as we think about the rating and the few and the powerful, it's kind of hard to think about what's not few and powerful in our beautiful matrix that we have here. So that's a big piece of context, and so all of them are important, and so both the weighting of them as well as those minimum thresholds become really, really critical because every single one of them is important. Next slide, please. So, and the equity piece, as we know, that is a driving consideration for all of our work, especially Spark. And so we want to make sure that we're creating a rating system that is reflective of quality. It has to mean something. That's why we're doing Spark.
Sorry, this is Chelsea. We can't see your slides.
Okay, interesting. Kristen's going to work on that. Thank you so much for jumping in. Sorry about that. Let me just pause a second so we can get that up there. Sorry, Renee and Chelsea. We thought it was showing. Okay, hopefully that is coming.
Can you see it now?
Let me see. Yeah. Well, I'm not hooked up to the projector. Can you see it now? No. Do you need me to allow you to be presenter? Hold on one sec, folks. Let me make sure she's presenter here. So should I make you presenter again? Okay, and you're Donalda Dodson? Let's try that. You're in two places. OCDC's in good hands. Okay. Yay, I think we got it. Can you folks see it? Okay, great. So sorry about that. Thanks for bringing that to our attention early on. Okay, so we were just talking about the importance of equity and making sure that we've got meaningful minimums as well as we want them to be accessible. And if you remember, the concept of this, of our rating system was for a 3-star to be an achievable level of quality and really that accessible rung on the ladder. So, and as we're thinking about what the weighting looks like, it really could look different across types of programs, and we need to really be thinking about the implications for, you know, whether it's geographic, culturally specific, size, etc. So a lot to think about. And as we talked about with PQ, I mean, that's in a sense a rating concept in and of itself, making sure that we're looking across all types of providers and programs and the barriers that face them because of our system, that's accessible as well. So I think I also just want to highlight for context, as we're talking about the rating system, the weighting is just one piece of it. There's many, many other things that go into the rating, whether you're thinking about portfolio reviewers having inter-rater reliability, et cetera, and I think some of that we'll be bringing back to you as we get closer to implementation. We've got the standards all set, and we really know what it is we want those rating and reviewers to be doing. So I want to make sure that we're talking about weighting in the context of a bigger picture. But as we talk about weighting and minimums, there's so many different ways we could think about that, and we really felt like as we dove in after our conversation last time, we can't really finalize that right now. We don't have the standards finalized. We're still looking at these details, for example, in PQ that will get us to those finals. So we're not coming today saying, okay, this one's worth 5 points, this one's 4, 3, 2, 1. It's just we're not quite there yet. It's a little preliminary to do that. And so what we need to do is get down the road and then really pull together some scenarios and doing some testing, I think, as we talked about last time, so that we're showing that however we end up with the rating and the weighting, that it's fair and equitable and makes sense and reflects both quality and accessibility. So we're going to give a couple examples of how weighting might look. So here's an example of different standards. So we could take a look and say, in a 4-star program, we want the supportive learning through interactions and that adult-child interactions to weigh more than the environment. So there's an example of weighting a domain. That's one thing that it could look like. Or we could have another example of weighting within a standard, and that's what we talk about PQ, right? We could say, okay, PQ is a whole domain in and of itself, but we could say we want one piece of that, one component of that to weigh more than other components. So that's another way that it could look. It could be evidence. It could be that we say, if a program is showing us a policy, and those of you that are intimately familiar with the portfolio system, sometimes you have to show a policy. You've got a policy, let's pick on screen time. You've got a policy about screen time that your staff see, your family see, it's posted, versus a written description that I'm writing for my portfolio. It could be if it's an outward-facing policy, we want that to weigh more. So there's another category of weighting that we could talk about. So I'm just going to pause. Any questions there, or Robin, anything to add just in terms of the conversation?
I think that we went this direction because we really heard the conversation last time, and people were saying there's things that are more important and we really need to weigh them, and other people saying you've identified the important things. That's why you have 5 domains and 15 standards, and so they all should be worth the same. And then what we realized is we're already weighting things. I mean, inside the standards, we've talked about educational attainment and those kinds of things. So it really, the complexity was brought out here, and when we got deeper into it, all of these thoughts of like, well, we probably, even if we said we're not weighting, we're probably going to weight things within it, and so we just sort of wanted to say, here's where our thinking are, and then sort of come up with this idea of, as we're moving forward and looking at this, if we could get some thoughts or some approval from you guys to look at this weighting in a certain way, so that you know that we're thinking about equity, and we're thinking about different types of programs, and we're thinking about what we know about child outcomes and those pieces as we're moving forward, that you would feel good about the work we're doing, and we would feel good that we're working sort of within a framework that makes sense for the state. So I think that's sort of the next.
Exactly. So I think what we're asking for today, similar to what we did earlier with the idea of the sort of early adopted changes, is hi, folks, we're back. Do we have folks back on the phone? Yay, okay.
Well, we made lots of decisions while we cut you all off, so don't worry.
Okay. So getting back to, let's see, the last slide. So this is, we wanted to, again, to kind of get into, oh, that's the wrong slide. To kind of what should be driving the decision. So kind of the concepts we were thinking about was that any weighting and rating minimum decisions would be focused on equity and accessibility, be data-driven and based on best practices, consider the system validity and measurability. And I think that's kind of what we were talking about our standards really measurable? Is this something that should sit in our QIS because it's something we can measure through our portfolio process or the class assessment? And does it also recognize the uniqueness of the program? So it's a weighting of or rating of quality that any type of program could see themselves and demonstrate within that. Thoughts on this? Questions? Concerns?
This is Susan. I'm thinking about the complexity of rating. I don't really on that one way or the other, just sort of a concern about how much longer will it take to rate and how complex that will be to rate them. Or maybe even the understandability or programs that are
Again, I come back to our case out to figure out licensing and figure out grow, and if we hand them SMART and it's weighted with everything that's not weighted, and trying to understand all of that. Just so I'm clear, so you're talking about from a program perspective to understand if I submit this and I've submitted it correctly, I'll get what? Okay, yeah.
This is Kristen, and just in response to that, if I'm understanding both of your comments, so the K-12 in particular, if you're using this, I forgot, matrix
So, Kristen, are you suggesting that if whatever the weighting and the rating ends up being, that there could be like a visual kind of matrix that would really lay it all out, and that would be a really transparent way for programs to understand?
Yeah, in fact, I'm not just suggesting, I was making the assumption that that's what it's going to look like.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great.
I do have a question, Kristen, again, as long as someone else has something. The second, I'm looking at the paper that you gave us here, and it's the second bullet point about some forms of evidence can be weighted more heavily than others. So I fully understand the other two bullets and like them, agree with them, think they're best practice. I'm wondering about that second bullet point. Some forms of evidence can be weighted more heavily than others. Pictures of environments weigh more than descriptions of environments. My question is why, and the other part of that question is there something else that would make me change my mind that that one is not a good idea?
That's a really good question. I think these are just examples pulled from the cloud. This isn't necessarily the way it is or the way it would be, but it's a possibility. So, for example, would we rate at the 4-star level direct observation from the class and how programs do on the class the same as a program sending in a picture of, say, a standard around their environment and their materials? So you've got direct observation. Could that or should that weigh more than something that somebody wrote for their portfolio? So it's not, it's a potential. I guess that's kind of what we're posing. Is that something that could be or should be considered?
What you're saying is if there's a stronger piece of evidence,
Right.
I mean, because I could personally write something, but have photographic documentation of it says something. It's a stronger piece of evidence.
Oh, okay, this is Kristen again. I guess what I would say then in this particular example is I don't think simply a description. I mean, I can say anything I want to say.
Yeah.
You know, I think you have to have evidence. That's how we do life. That's how we do school. That's how we do data. So writing something to me is not enough. So I was looking at it a little bit differently. Like everybody should have to at least have pictures or provide evidence.
Maria?
And I was going to say, from my experience, with specifically Spanish providers, like pictures that they were to weigh more, their environments be wonderful, but they're not great writers. So they don't describe things as we would want them, or someone who could very nicely write a book, but they wouldn't reflect. So I think, and for my case, that would be really, really helpful because they can have beautiful homes, they just don't know how to describe them in writing.
I also agree with Meredith's example. Having somebody else come in and observe versus even a photograph. To me, that's a stronger piece of evidence than a photograph.
So what I'm hearing is that we're supporting evidence, and that there are different degrees of evidence. And those degrees of evidence would help us in the scoring or whatever.
I'm not sure I agree.
Okay.
I think if there are standards of evidence to prove what you're saying, you should meet the standard for evidence. And if we don't feel like a written description is a valid or worthy piece of evidence, then we shouldn't allow it.
So, right. Just not being correct for them. So the different degrees of weighting would be described in the rubric or the matrix, right? So that everybody was really clear if just want to go into the description and don't know. Like, it's weighted this much, and if I want to be over here, then I need to do this, and this is going to be cut and dry.
I think we want it to be really transparent.
To
follow your thought, and I think that it is very transparent right now because the providers get the whole look, what the evidence is, tips on the back for what to do, what a written description is, what it needs to include. So I think we would want it to be that transparent, but then we're adding points to it.
Well, that's what I mean. And so the points, it'll have like how many points for each one. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
That's my assumption. Let me check in with the TRI folks so that programs would know how many points everything
I guess that's what I'm getting at. So they would know exactly. Yeah.
Check the chat box. Great. So Betty said, is there any research on which kinds of evidence measurement are more strongly associated with quality outcomes for children? It seems like there should be. Evidence, and Chelsea agrees with Betty. Evidence. I don't feel like I've seen anything on that. It's an interesting question. We'll pose that to our national experts, Betty. That's a really interesting question. One thing that's so interesting is that so many states rely on on-site assessments, whether it's the ECHRS or class or those types of things. What's that? Or both. So they're very expensive systems that can't include as many programs percentage-wise because it's taking those trained observers to go in and do that. So that becomes a whole different question of evidence than when you've got a portfolio system. And so it's and then making the link between the evidence that a provider is doing in child outcomes is really tricky because the link to get to child outcomes takes so much time. But I think it's an interesting question, and we'll pose that. Thank you.
This is Pam. I'm just thinking that if I'm a provider and I can see that I can write a description of my environment, or I have to go buy an instant camera or borrow somebody's camera and I can get more points, then I think that allows the flexibility of me saying, you know what, I'm in Elgin, Oregon, and I am not going to go and figure out how to do that. I can accept that it offers the ability, but it also recognizes the effort of somebody going and figuring out, okay, I'm going to borrow my neighbor's camera, figure out how to get it. I mean, there is something to be said about the different levels of evidence. I mean, it's kind of like when you write a grant. It gets scored on the quality of evidence that you put forward. So I guess that's how I can understand weighting the quality of evidence.
This is Susan. I can understand what you're saying, but as someone who's done a lot of evaluation of after-school programs, what somebody tells me about their work is sometimes different than what I observe about their work or their environment. It also makes me think of an artist or a model presenting their portfolio to someone who they want them to hire them. Would I accept their written description of their work as acceptable in determining whether or not I would accept the quality of their work, or I want to see their work? So I still don't feel like a written description would be totally acceptable.
It depends on, for me, it depends on what it is that they're doing. You know, if they're describing how they communicate with parents and keep their communication going.
A description
versus,
is appropriate there.
Versus with me, I have a policy in my organization, you know, that outlines it all. To me, yeah, I think maybe I should get some extra points because I went through that, but that other person shouldn't be not counted for being able to describe a really good communication system of engaging families. They shouldn't be penalized. Totally.
It seems this is Danelda. It seems like there's some really correlations between what we've done with the staff qualifications and what we're trying to do here as far as, you know, we're looking at the diversity of them. We're looking at the degree to which certain things. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, there's this big concept.
Here's what I have captured for the people on the phone, and then also if I capture something wrong, please let me know. But Another maybe sort of guiding principle is to remember that transparency is still a value in our system. The programs need to understand what they'll be rated on and how they'll be rated, and that rubrics and matrix can help with that. Also, that transparency sort of gives programs flexibility, or lets programs decide how they want to provide it. If writing's easier, maybe they do writing. If not, they do something else. And then back to the different evidence types also gives flexibility. So that was something I think in the, you can a little bit see in the standards that were listed, that is something that we need to flesh out more is, right now it is, you have to have a policy submitted, and if you don't, then you don't get any credit, even if you have a great written description, but having multiple evidence types so that programs can show you the way that they best can show you is another sort of idea coming up. Did I capture what was said? I know you were saying you didn't really agree, but then I was hearing maybe it was a different argument on the same theme. Did I capture what you said? I understand Pam's point of view really well. I do understand it, but I'm not sure I totally agree.
So I think if there were concrete examples, you would probably find that Susan and I would say, oh no, you can't use a written one on that one. Right. I think that's the problem with concepts sometimes, that you can't get.
I also am concerned about the scoring of that and the complexity of understanding how you'll be scored, and on the side of the raters
and the validity
to find a score, and then how subjective is that score once you get it. And
are you guys trying to capture this problem? Like, I mean, like you were saying, some of the things we had to write, and then some of them was like strictly on policy. So are you trying to say, like, I mean, that's like double the work. So you're trying to get away from doing that? Is that what you're trying to capture here, is trying to make a little bit, like some things that we had to write out, we had to like use the wording that's on, you know, so here it took longer because you're trying to write this whole thing when you clearly had a policy for it.
I hear that as a different point, Autumn, and I think it's an excellent point, is the, you know, as the guiding principle, is the rating system building on things, documents, et cetera, that a program has already, or is it asking to create something new? Which, if you don't have a policy manual and you have to create a policy manual to be doing all these practices, that's one thing, but to have to recreate something that maybe you would have in a different evidence form. So I think that's
some of the things I had to you know, I had to recreate or add to, which was a good thing, you know, things that I didn't know. You know, that part I don't want to lose that part, right? Because it did build my policy better, you know, as I went through a couple of different areas, but not, some of it we really had to double do, you know, when clearly had this evidence and we had to write it out.
Well, because I didn't have to go through the process, though, like you did. So you're saying you already had a policy in place and you couldn't just present that policy. You had to then write a description of what it is? Correct. Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous.
You know, and so that took a little bit more time. And using some of the words, I felt like sometimes we had to do it to have a standard of using your words that were on the paper. So it was a lot of work. That part, you know, not a lot, but I mean, I can think of a couple things that maybe a little work that I clearly had. You know,
Because I had to attach our screen time policy.
Yeah, we did.
Do it. I didn't do any description, so I don't know all, because I didn't have to do all those pieces to it. But yeah.
And we did the same thing, retention.
Yeah, evidence is evidence. And if what you're rating is you're looking for key phrases, whether it's in a policy or something that's written, you're looking for key phrases. And if they're there, they're there.
Mm-hmm. I think the concept of not wanting to have unintentional advantages or disadvantages is a, I don't think that's important. Yeah.
You're thinking specifically specifically around the evidence or overall?
Overall, and it could be with evidence. In some, just because of the, let's say if you're center-based, you can be heavy advantage, but if you're home-based, it's a big disadvantage. So how do we balance that so that we're not penalizing one and giving a get-home free card to another?
Right. I've listened and I worry that we lose some of the rigor.
Mm-hmm.
If, we talk a lot about access, which I agree is important, but how do we balance the rigor of the quality rating process? I don't have an answer.
I guess that's why I think of weighted evidence is that's the only way I can think of balancing it out. This is that not just saying, oh no, that's not, you can't even use that, but or well, you get a few points for that because that's better than nothing. But I don't know.
That's an interesting, the rigor of the evidence, and yeah, that's an interesting concept. Thoughts from folks on the phone?
This is Chelsea. You had mentioned that there are many other QRIS programs around the U.S. that have chosen to kind of go away from portfolios and more focus on classroom observations using a classroom-based tool. So do we have feedback as to why they chose to make that switch? What was, yes, it's more costly, but what were they seeing that made them kind of head in that direction, just so that we have evidence as to our portfolios effective, and then really what stands out in a portfolio and what really matters, so that we're not asking providers to do, like maybe a ton of policies and procedures if that's not actually creating outcomes for children.
That is the heart of the issue. You captured that exactly well. So I guess I would clarify a little bit. A lot of programs have QRISs, and feel free to jump in here because Tom and Robin have done a lot of studying with this. They started with just on-site assessment, and I think because the nugget of what we know from the research is that adult-child interaction from the research has the biggest potential to impact child outcomes. So that's why states went to that. What I'm hearing, and we were just at our national QRIS conference with 1,000 people who were really excited about QRIS around the country. It was awesome. Totally. She was there too. But what we're actually hearing is that programs are moving, I think, more towards a mixed portfolio and on-site based, I think because of the cost. And because they're better able to really serve a lot of populations, especially when you're thinking about very rural states, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say the movement is in that direction. And the jury's really still out about how you what the validation studies are finding about how you link kind of what we're doing to child outcomes 20 years down the road, because this is all still fairly new. But I would say, why is it that we're not just looking at adult-child interactions? It's not just because of the cost, but there's also things that really bring a lot of value to the field about a QRIS. And I don't know, do you folks remember the revision wheel that we've shown that has 12, 16 different pieces of the pie that are going to QRIS? Because even beyond adult-child interactions, there are really things that are important to us as a state, as a field, and cultural responsiveness is, maybe at the top, and I think measuring that in a number of different ways becomes really important, and that's where you start adding, some more of the few and the powerful into those things. The personnel qualifications, we know one of the goals of a QRIS is to professionalize the field, to support and encourage providers to be recognized for the incredibly important pieces of society that they are, and so that's, then, you start pulling in PQ. So I don't know that totally answers your question, because you sort of have the $64,000 question, but I guess that's just a summary of, I think, what we're seeing. Robin or Tom, would you add anything? Yep, that's really good. Be happy happy to bring tons and tons of research for your bedtime reading. It's really good stuff. Okay, let's see. We have a comment here. Chelsea, thank you for your comment. It was right in line with what I was thinking, said Renee.
Capture that. How would you capture that?
Is it maybe highlighting why we have more than just, I don't know, you can help us here, Renee, just maybe why we have more than just on-site observation, what goes into a portfolio?
So that's one of the considerations as we're rating too, I would say that the observation is an important part, that as well as the written value.
And I think it's what we're observing too. It'd be one thing to go in and observe the environment and check out their materials and their, you know, and spend resources on that versus to go in to do, we don't really have as a field other ways to capture high quality adult-child interaction other than these on-site tools that we have, and they're not great, but that's the best that we have. I mean, I shouldn't say they're not great, they're not perfect is what I mean. They're not perfect, but it's what we have right now, and so to spend the resources capturing because that's the nugget. I think we have Maria and then Pam.
I just want to kind of say that I think the weighing in kind of is more inclusive of more providers, specifically the home-based, because they have different strengths, so be building more on their strengths, and again, not having others have, to a certain extent, an advantage. Just with the challenge that comes with it, not just monolingual Spanish, but a lot of even monolingual English who are home-based that don't have a lot of the expertise in writing or anything, so I think being able to lay that out and giving them kind of a more equal playing field. I also think with this, the observations would come in at a 4-star, so that rigor piece of things, you know, when we lose that, no, I think it actually would be stronger because you're going to have the observation at a 4-star instead of a 5-star, and in the current system.
Yeah, that's a great point because that's a significant change.
And it is.
And build from there.
Pam, were you here? Oh, okay. I'll read from the chat box and maybe you'll remember. Okay, so this is from Sabrina. And Sabrina said she was present at the QRIS National meeting, which I just referenced, and I want to share that from what I learned about QRIS nationally, Oregon is making huge progress to equity and equality compared to other states.
Good.
Thank you, Sabrina.
So how do we capture that in our points then? No, I'm just...
Has there been any research about submitting videotaping? I mean, you know what, when you were talking, I was like remembering many, many years ago what I had to do student teaching. And one of the things I had to do was the old VHS. I mean, I had to submit videotape of me teaching. And then I had to sit down with somebody and review it. I'm just wondering, just out of curiosity,
That would help on top.
of submitting, I mean, I get that, yes, you can get there and you can stage the whole interaction with kids. I totally get that. But being a class observer myself, the teachers stage what they're doing when you're doing, I mean, it's like, the way I look at it is when I go in and I observe, I'm figuring that this is like, you know that your guest is coming. When you have a guest, you clean your house, you're on your best behavior. So if this is your best behavior, because I know that that's not your 100% behavior, this is your best behavior because I'm there. So, how is that different than the video? If you know that the video is their best behavior,
Take it from there.
how is that different than when you go in and observe and they're on their best behavior?
That's actually a really great point. And with K-12 with the evaluation system, and it's what we've been doing for years, you go in and observe the teacher, right? And they go on the dog and pony show, and it's great. But if you just were to come in without them knowing, it looks very different. So you're exactly right. It's their best performance. Might be okay or not, but whether it's a video or that, that's absolutely right. It's when you come in when they don't know you're coming. That's when the evaluation system makes a difference. Whether it's this or Are they doing it when you're not there?
Right.
I mean, it's natural. We would all do it. When I first went to work in a lab school and it had the one-way windows, you know, so you couldn't see who was looking, I was like paranoid. And then I realized, relax. You know, you have to be just who you are. I mean, it's just part of the
process.
So video or in person.
Yeah. I don't know.
They
It's
know
just
you're
one way to think about it.
Well, and that, I think that's such an important point, and it makes me think about having a variety of evidence, and is that a strength? Then when you're balancing, you know, you're getting some snapshots, which might be their best material on their best day, and you're getting policy then, which the assumption is that all your staff have seen it, all your parents have seen, you know, so is there a strength to having that kind of blended evidence?
I think there is a strength for that. So whether it's a direct observation or a video, if you're looking for other evidence, I think it's the combination of all of those things, and not just, I think that's really important. Really important.
Is that captured here? We have like different or variety evidence gives flexibility. Do we want to also just say is it straight? I mean, is it more than just the flexibility for the program? Is it really? Do I need to capture more on that, or is that captured? Do you feel like? Or is it a different point?
That point to me is about flexibility, which, yes, videotaping, photographing, all that are flexibility, but it goes back to weighting different levels of evidence differently.
Right.
I mean, you know what, it's a lot easier to capture a perfect environment in a solid one photo than it is to capture a beautiful environment while you're interacting and videotaping. You know what, there has to be more truth to that videotape.
I think the best way to look at that is like when we do an evaluation system and we're looking at the different weighted, the different evidence. You can either be, you have this much evidence, but all of it is a combination, and so you may be proficient. But if you have more of the evidence of the combination, it may move you over to distinguished. So it may move you from 4 to 5. You know what I mean? And so the more evidence you have, the further you move along. Does that make sense?
That's like the continuum.
Yeah.
And Sabrina, let's see. Chelsea just added, I think having a blend is good. The question I have is what should be in that blend? And Renee says, does mixed collection of information penalize family providers who have limited resources? And that kind of gets back to your issue, Donalda, or your question. Yeah.
This is Kristen. I think having a blend is good. The question is what should be in that blend. I also think having a blend is good and concur with everybody who's spoken about that. I think when you're measuring different things, it already calls for different types of evidence. So I think the answer to the question about one way. Yeah, what should be in the blend? I have a hard time of being too specific because the things that you're measuring are going to call for different types of evidence just naturally.
So would you give something like, I think I'm understanding, so would you give something like, this is what we're looking for you a direct, and then here's all the possible evidence that could be a piece of that would if you have the direct and then you have, here's all the possible evidence, and you look at that those would then weighted more heavily if you had the combination of it. Here's the possible evidence, letters to family in their native language, a policy around that, all those different things would then weight it, would give it more weight. Am I making
You know, I understand what you're saying exactly, yeah. And Chelsea says, knowing that family child care homes may be different, the blend should include strategies that apply to all programs so that it's inclusive.
Is there, this is Donalda, is there potential built-in rating already in the way we've got the matrix set out? In that as you progress, there are more things that you need to be looking at. It seems like there's some natural weighting, so to speak, because if you don't have it, then you don't have it. And so if you're wanting to get to a 5-star, then you have to have more components of what we're talking about. So it's naturally built in. As I look at this, and even on here, it looks the graduated. Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the intention, so that a program can submit what they have on that domain, and then the rater can say, well, you've got everything up to the 5-star with what you showed us. You're doing it all. And then the next domain, they show whatever they have, and well, gosh, you've got everything up to the 4-star, so that they're not being. That's the difference with the block system. They're not being capped at that they're showing.
And they may have some 3s, and then, because if you add 2, like in family engagement, then you're showing evidence of the developed relationships within the families and the access to the parenting resources. If you don't have that, then you're not at that level yet. So some of it may be already built in. We're just trying to create something that we don't need to create.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I guess I just want to come back to what we talked about last meeting, because I think what we're proposing is maybe not necessarily giving what was kind of proposed last meeting, which was weighting based on the domains. And sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I could pull it up, but we did in order, and I think it was, I think learning and development was the top, followed by maybe inclusion of culture and family. Remember, we ranked the domains, and it wasn't 100% on agreement on that, but there was some general consensus. And I think, help me out here, Robin, I think what we're coming back to say is that we couldn't find a way to do that in that clear cut of a way, that there's too much else going into it, and the domains were cut down to the few and the powerful, that there wasn't a way to simply say that domain gets 5 points, it's 4, 3, 2, 1, but we want to add these guiding principles as we're looking at the domains, the standards within the domains, and the evidence, and that based on these conversations that the expert would take it back. So I guess I wanted to come back to that and just be really transparent that I don't feel like that is the rating approach that makes sense to take right now, and make sure that we've had enough conversation so that folks are feeling okay with that, or we've had a chance to change our thinking.
Yeah, as soon as you put up the slide, it was clear to me that what you were saying is that you can't just take one domain and weight that and that there are different types of criteria within each domain that could be weighted differently. And I totally agree that it's too complex of a system. I mean, to not do that is what I'm trying to say. I don't think it would be fair to do it the other way.
And this, in fact, I think that was the discussion when we talked about this at the last time, that there were several that said, but all of these are important. So how can you say one is not? And that's back to Susan's comment earlier, that the domains are all important. It's the degrees within those, it seems like. I think maybe some are agreeing that we're agreeing that you can't take the domains and rate the domains.
Well, I agree that in terms of understanding what I charged them with, I'm understanding that now, even though I probably was one of the people that said that I thought one domain was more important than the other. I understand the complexity of how you have to do that. It might not work that way.
Other folks thoughts about that, or thoughts on the phone?
I come from a health background, so I was thinking it's kind of like the body. You can't say one is more important than the other because it all functions together. It's kind of like that's how this is. Each of those systems are intertwined. You can't say one system is greater than the other. You can limp along with some systems that are not full function, but they still are all coordinated together. So did we answer your question?
Yeah, I heard from Pam. I'm seeing some head nodding. Let's see. I see Betty Steele says, I like what I'm hearing and agree wholeheartedly.
I think she was one that was saying,
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
This is Kristen. I was trying to hear what either Tom or Robin has to say because I didn't pick up on the fact that that's the direction this conversation was going at all. And so what are your thoughts about, I think we got to the point now that we're talking about not just the evidence piece, but weighting domains or standards.
My thought is that Pam was right. We went back and took this and really looked deep and had very similar conversations and said, this is super complex, and to be able to, especially at this point in the revision process, say the standards across this domain are more important than other ones, really felt like, what about all of our other goals about equity, about access, about rigor, about creating a 3-star that's achievable and moving people up a rung, and to say right now that one is more important than that, especially because the first, many times when we bring things to you, we've gotten community engagement already and taken it out, and you guys got the rating stuff hot off the presses, which was why we had the question, like, what do you think about weighting? We hadn't dove deep into that yet. You guys dove deep into that and sort of moved us into that deep conversation, and we thought, we don't ever do anything without taking it out to the community, and so we wanted to come back with you guys with a responsive, like, we can't make those 100% what's weighted higher than others, and we felt really uncomfortable, especially at that overarching level, ranking them or rating them because we hadn't heard, because we haven't thought of all of the unintended consequences of doing that, and because we learned from the current system that by giving PQ 100%, I mean, PQ is rated higher, is weighted higher than anything because it's the only one that they have to have 100% in, that we were worried about doing it. And so the complexity is what we wanted to bring back and say, here are some ways that we're going to think about this. We want to get more community engagement on the idea of this rating system. It's something different than we've done before with points. Tom, do you have anything to add?
Well, and I do agree with Pam. The complexity of how it works together is something that needs to be worked on more, and I don't think we'll be able to come up with saying this domain or the standard is weighted heavier than others. It's how they're all going to play together. So I agree we need more community input. We need to look at it deeper, but I don't think we can really go there. Is my first take on it. And I would like to have the flexibility to have these guiding principles rather than saying one domain or one standard would weigh more than another. Does that make sense?
And I go back to that thought that we had. We do not want to have unintentional advantages or disadvantages, and so that we have to have a pretty level playing field, but we have a lot of different players in that field that are at different levels.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You're pondering it.
Yeah. And I kind of have a pondering for Tom and Robin too. I'm thinking about Virginia's QRIS, and the way they initially came out with it, it was primarily a point system, and they stick in my mind as my most favorite QRIS website because you could go on and you could pull up a rated program, and it would have, ABC childcare, and it would have their QRIS rating, and I think they had 4 or 5 different domains, and you could hover your mouse over each domain, and it would tell you what that domain was, why it was important, and how many points that program got in it. And I'm thinking when we get through this whole process and we're on the other side with our big gala kickoff of the new Spark in the ballroom,
You're going to drop the ball.
they're going to drop something, drop stars on the ceiling. That we would have a visual. That we would have a pretty transparent rubric kind of visual thing that would show how it all falls out. So it could be in the end, what do we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out of our 6 domains, it could be positive relationships has 50 points. Learning and development has 40 points, etc. I think in the end we'll have numbers and we'll have a visual for all of that, and so we'll be able to see, oh, okay, this is where I earned my most points, but I know it's really hard to get the points. Or this. So I think we'll have all of that in the end. We're just not there yet. But would you agree with that? In the end, we'll have like a nice visual of where all the points shook out. Yep.
Meredith, I just have to make a comment about the Virginia site. Like, as soon as you talked about hovering, I just thought as a parent, if you have certain things that you value over other things, and I value it differently than you, and to be able to do that, to see that this program is stronger in this area, and this is the area that I value, you know.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's a huge shift the way we're talking about. And maybe, Pam, maybe you just got to the essence of it, because I keep reflecting back on our rubric here with the goals that the Early Learning Council has presented for us. And, you know, does this type of system really get at that? Does it get at the parent choice? They'll be able to see it. Does it get at the program diversity so that they are credited for their strengths in one domain versus another? And so maybe that, you know, what you're describing from the parent view and the family voice really gets at, I think, what this is trying to achieve.
But that also, I love that comment, because what it said to me too, we're not saying the goal isn't 5-star necessarily. The goal is to be able to articulate what is going on in each of those areas so that as a consumer you can say, this is the quality that I want. So I think it changes the focus from trying to get a number to trying to achieve a certain activity or certain quality.
And this is a program that matches.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that sounds like
that's exciting.
A better way to describe what we're doing, and it also relates to quality when you're saying, this is the quality that I want, the value, not that everybody is the quality, this is the particular quality that I'm looking for. So it's more consumer-based. It gives me chills.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's it right there.
Yeah. So we're
And
not
I think
looking
even if it's described to, whether it's center-based or whatever, to describe it that way to providers, I think that to me, that there may be more buy-in about why we're trying to do this. You know what I mean? Like, that makes sense.
Yeah. We're not all trying to get to this number.
Yeah.
We're trying to get to these components.
So the parents can see, this is what I'm looking for. It's transparent, clear-cut, been evaluated. You know what I mean? And it goes beyond what does it cost and what are the hours. Yeah. Which is the way parents are forced to shop for their program. But it does give them other options to look at, which is important. Yeah.
Well, and it also it allows staff to select, you know, I like to be in this kind of an environment versus this environment.
And it gives other programs a way to promote each other.
Yes.
Because, you know, you may have somebody in your program that doesn't match well in your program, but this other program
would be a shoe-in.
it would be a much better fit. And you're able to talk about those qualities in each other's program.
Then we would have a community system. We just went from rating into creating a community system.
Love it.
Do we have any more questions or thoughts about this? How can we capture some of these kind of esoterical thoughts? Because it really relates to quality versus numbers. That makes sense, Robin?
Mm-hmm. She wrote consumer-based sort of transparency of strengths for programs, and it is a component of QRS. Consumer education is the wonky way of talking about how do we work with community and families, but it's a component of QRS that, I mean, it also gets to the idea of how complex all of this stuff is, that everything does fit together, and we try to separate it into little pieces, but when we're talking about this, it's important to remember, why are we rating really for families? So,
and it's more around consumer choice that meets the values of the consumer. And we've not talked about consumer values. We're just always going to train them.
Yeah, I do primarily down to banana. So your economics and your geography and all those needs are how you choose your store or where to go to get stuff. But when you go to buy bananas, she might like some really ripe, and I might like some really green. And so to me, that's what we're talking about really, is that they're both bananas, they're both quality. It's just my preference on how I value where I want that banana to be at.
That's a good point.
And that value is really clear. You can see it.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
That's great.
I want to write the choice word up there.
Yeah. I wonder if I can try to summarize what I think we've heard in a way that maybe is adjusting that last slide. So I'm trying to get kind of what the takeaway guiding principles that you all want us to have as the revision team as we go forth and do the real weedy, the banana, right, bananas.
I'm sorry, can I just, this is Kristen, and I heard you say family choice, and that's what I heard also from Ava, but a family choice of best fit. Really get that in.
And value for them.
Yeah, that's to me just what you want.
Well, and we just connected the family to the process,
Yeah.
which is what we're supposed to be doing.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's good.
I get it right in bananas. I really like that.
Yeah.
Okay, should I take a stab at summarizing this?
She started out there.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. Should I add things, Kristen? Should I talk and you can add it? Okay. So I heard that this needs, the rating system needs to support equity. And a very specific example that, Maria, I think you brought us back to, which is super important, is that it not be overly focused on writing or really maybe any particular type of evidence, but that there's some flexibility in there for programs to shine. What was in here already that we talked about was originally the data-driven and best practice, but we kind of got down to the rigor. I think the rigor of the evidence then leading to the rigor of the system.
And that ties to the idea of, now I'm pointing, maybe it's not on there, but of looking at other states and what evidence do they use and what has, you know, sort of why were they doing observations and moving to other types of evidence. So that sort of adds to that, like what's best practice, not just for working with children, but also in QRS, what's QRS best practice.
Great, okay, and that's a follow-up, I think, for us to do. Okay. That we want to make sure that the rating system recognizes the uniqueness and the strengths of programs.
And two is that the rating system is a description of certain activities. It's not whether it's A or a C. It's so that people can see how it fits with what their particular values are. That makes, trying to take it away from, oh, we're all going to try to be 5. Maybe that's not where everybody wants to be. Maybe, you know, we need a little 5, a little 3, and a little 4. So find out how to see that, because then that really reflects quality, not so much numbers.
So would that be captured in the uniqueness of having a diversity of programs and the strengths? So if you, is that captured?
I think so. Just from our discussion, that was such a rich discussion.
A couple others that I heard were really important is simplicity and non-duplication for programs. And I don't know if we've already used the word transparency there, but that would be critical for programs as well. Oh, it is? Our slide got so big, we're on 50 pages. And then I also think we talked about transparency and clarity for the consumers and making this really consumer-based and best fit for families, which I think was up there. I think that was about, did that hit all the key points?
I think the consumer-based also helps strengthen the equity, because if we look at our consumers and how are we articulating this for the variety of consumers that are here.
So if we clean that up a little bit and get really clear on that, maybe this is the decision now. I don't know if you want to do 5 to 5, but do these guiding principles, are these acceptable to the committee in terms of us moving forward, looking at the rating system, which, as we've talked about, includes how we look at the domains, the standards, the evidence, which leads us to the point distribution? Is that
seems like it would be something we'd want to see, and how does this cook out?
Yeah, that you'd want us to bring back,
right,
as we go down the road.
Because we've got a lot of thoughts that are here, and yes, this is our kind of our foundation.
So I guess the question is,
we can kind of turn it and talk about it, and make it into something real.
Which I think is going to be down the road quite a bit, I'm guessing. I mean, I think we might revisit this quite a few months down when it's much more baked.
Yeah. The evidence thing might come back earlier, because the evidence is sort of going along with the standard, so sort of some more examples of in different places to get to the point of different evidence for different things. That I think will come back sooner rather than later, but the point and that is, I think, is further down the road.
It's almost like that comment that we had at the Equity Committee about how we would demonstrate it culturally responsive. We're almost, this is kind of being culturally responsive. How do we get this system culturally responsive? We've got the science, we've got the content. How do we make it culturally responsive in our state? Which is the rating.
It's where the rubber meets the road, yeah. So at a high level, given the principles that we're charged with, does this feel like that we have consensus to use these as our principles moving forward, and that we will definitely bring it back more baked as we go? A few head nods. Folks on the phone, thoughts about this?
Seems like it's really focusing on our principles 5 and 6, which we hadn't necessarily focused on that much. The family, you know, as a committee, you were wondering, we were concerned that we hadn't had as many family voices. This really seems to take that into consideration, and then talking about how we're aligning our work together in the community. Needs to be fleshed out.
Okay. We have a sounds good from Chelsea, sounds good from Betty, and Renee. We are moving in the right direction. Nice summary. Thank you.
Good, good. Next time I'll serve bananas. I do like that analogy, though. That's so true.
They'll provide us with a range of choices.
Every grocery store in county.
But it does really describe what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It does. Any other thoughts? I know it's Friday. I think that sounds good. I really, really appreciate that richness of the conversation. It's so good, doesn't it? Yeah, it gives you lots of kernels to chew on. Yes.
We appreciate all the work this committee does.
Super helpful. I love the thought. So, I think that we're almost done. We've summarized where we are, and now our next meeting will be the 18th, and we'll circle back on these things and continue.
Yeah, it looks like what we've got for August, tell me if it sounds right to you, Donalda, we've got bringing forward and doing some policy assessment of how we're looking to target supports to programs and providers, and supports in terms of the professional development supports, coaching, et cetera, as well as financial supports and how we're looking at that next go around.
And then are we going to finish, do we have anything more on education qualifications? Any more? I think we're done. That, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll stay in the context of the standards.
Okay. Okay, and we will send out the definition of experience. Right. Well, thank you. Your comments are so helpful, and then we'll take this back to equity. I think this really reflects equity throughout. Great.
Yeah, I think your clarity today will really help. Thanks, everybody. Have a great month.
Pam, have a great vacation.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you on the phone.
Thank you.
Bye.